Hey kids, it's your old pal Mr. Sketchy. I'm coming to you from a storage unit that somebody left unlocked. I just came in here to make sure nothing sketchy was going on. Just checking, you know. But while I'm in here, I'm going to set up and do some drawing for you, and you can watch. So, please enjoy this brief demonstration sketching video. All right. All right, kids. Today we're going to be drawing facial features. So I'm going to start off with an eye. I'm going to show you kind of the parts of the eye and how to draw it simply with lines. And then I'm going to show you how to shade it, or where to look for shadows if you're shading. So a really good tip for drawing eyes is to start with the upper eyelid and break the shape down into 3 segments. All right. So I want to look at the 3 segments, how long they are, what angles they're at. And then I want to kind of turn that into a curve at the end because I don't want my eye to have a lot of corners. Same idea on the bottom, except there's only 2 segments down there. So if you look at how big each of those segments are and the angle they're going at, you're going to have a pretty good likeness of the eye you're drawing. And now I'm coming in with the outside of the iris. The iris should be overlapped by at least one of the eyelids, and oftentimes both. It's usually tucked up under the top eyelid, at least partially. Now there's a little crease on some people's eyes right above the eyelid. You want to get that if it's there. Depending on the construction of their particular eyelid, sometimes the whole thing comes down and there's not really that crease above. So look for that and put it in if you want it. Now I'm just darkening in the pupil. You want to make sure your pupil and your iris are circles. That's good. And then I'm just going to mark in kind of an eyebrow up here just to show you where that would go. And there's kind of a simple eye just using lines. Now I'm going to draw another one and kind of shade a little bit and show you where to look for shadows or where to add shadows if you're working from your imagination. So again, same idea. I'm breaking the top lid into 3 segments and then trying to turn them into a curve. And the bottom lid is just 2 segments. I get a little schmutz out of there. All right, so there we go. Now I'm going to draw my iris. Again, trying to get a circle. There's a technique that they use in manga and anime where they add whites to the bottom or the top of the eyes. If you put a white under the iris, it tends to make the person look crazy. And if you make the iris so there's white up above it, it makes the person look drunk or exhausted. So that's a stylistic thing you can do if you want. But generally on real eyes, you most of the time have an overlap on one or both lids. Oftentimes both. Almost always at least one, unless the eyes are open really wide. All right, so I've got a little shadow under the eye. So the bottom eyelid, since it curves out, oftentimes there will be a little shadow on that upper eye or below eyelid. So look for that. So I'm kind of indicating that. We also got a shadow under the ridge of the upper eyelid. And then here, you can make a second line here that kind of indicates the thickness or the width of the lower eyelid. Oftentimes that'll be created by a shadow. Sometimes you can see that edge. And then oftentimes there will be a little bit of shadow up here where the eyelid folds in to the eye socket. So look for that. Depending on which side the light's coming from, sometimes it's big, sometimes it's little. Usually one eye will have a little shadow there, one eye will have a lot of shadow, but it just depends where the light's coming from. So also pay attention and look at that. I'm adding in my eyebrow, and I'm deepening this crease a little bit. Now, you can see that I drew in the highlight. Eyes are wet, usually, and that makes them shiny. So oftentimes they'll have a strong highlight. It's a good idea before you start shading in the iris to kind of draw a light line around that highlight so you can protect it when you're shading. You can also erase highlights out, but you get better highlights if you can protect the paper usually. So now I'm drawing the eyelashes. The eyelashes actually come a little bit down from the eyelid and then hook back up. And then the lower ones, you see that second line that I drew under the top edge of the bottom lid? the eyelashes will actually grow out a little below there, kind of where that line is, and that's where they'll emerge from. So you can make the eyelashes as long as you want. You have to be careful though, because a lot of times if you make real long eyelashes, they start to look like spider legs, and they can scare people who are looking at your art. So you got to be careful about that. Now I'm shading in the iris. Oftentimes there'll be a darker ring of pigment around the outside of the iris, and then it'll be kind of lighter in that middle segment as it moves towards the pupil. So just kind of look out for that. There can also be a lot of variation and patterning in the iris. I'm not going to get too into that, but you can play around with that when you're drawing eyes on things to creep people out. You can also kind of chunk the eyelashes together into one kind of shape. It really depends. If someone's wearing a lot of makeup and their eyelashes are really separated and long, sometimes they'll be a little bit more like those spider legs I was talking about, but oftentimes they'll kind of be clumped together. So you should really draw what you see, not what you know is there. So if you can see the eyelashes separate, you might want to draw longer eyelashes on there and keep them separated. But if they're kind of merging into one blob, just draw them that way. Alright, so next we're doing a nose. So if you're drawing a nose using lines, you gotta be careful because you can use too many lines and make the nose look weird. The main parts we want to get when we're drawing a line drawing of a nose are the wings on the two sides and the bottom of the little ball in the middle. We also want to show the nostrils. Now, nostrils and how much nostril you show is going to vary from person to person, and that depends on the angle of the head, but also the angle of the nose. Some people have noses that go uphill, some have noses that go downhill, some have noses that are pretty flat. So you want to think about what kind of nose the person you're drawing has, or if you're drawing from reference, look at the nose and just look at how much nostril is showing. So I used just a soft line on the side of the nose there. Usually the light will be coming from one side or the other, and one side of the nose will be in shadow and one will be getting hit by the light. You can put a soft line in to indicate the dark side if you want. You don't necessarily need that line though, you can just use the end of the nose oftentimes. So here are some examples of different kind of nose nostril styles. First one is kind of a nose where the nostrils aren't showing. That could be like a flat nose, or if someone's looking down. The second one is a little bit more of an upturned nose where you're going to see a little more nostril happening. So, there's a lot of variation, but those are the basic parts. So just look at how they work together and focus on how much nostril you're seeing, and you should be good. So if I'm going to fully shade a nose, I'm going to add some soft shadows on the two sides. So in this case, the lights may be coming from the front or above. Usually there'll be a little shadow on those sides. So look at those shadows. Try to get the right shadow shape when you draw it, but this is just to generally where you will look for them. And then there's a kind of a bulb or a ball on the end of the nose. The shape of that will be different. Some people have pointy nose, some people have really round nose, some people have big hook noses. It's all right. All noses are beautiful, but if you want to draw someone accurately, you need to look at what kind of nose they have and look at how the light is interacting. I'm adding a little bit peak of nostril. And then I'm going to add some shadow. Now generally, people are going to have light shining on them from above. So usually the bottom of the nose is going to be in shadow. Oh, on these wings there's some creases where it attaches to the face. Those will oftentimes have pretty dark shadow in them, so you can usually indicate those with kind of a heavier line, especially if you're just doing a line drawing. Alright, so the underside of the nose is going to be in shadow, so I'm going to shade it. I want to shade just the parts of the wings that are going to be facing down, so that kind of edge. And then for the ball of the nose, I want to think about it almost like it's a sphere, and just kind of shade the lower curved part. Next we're going to do a mouth. So I think the best way to do mouths is to start with the line in the middle, the expression line that opens up for the food to go in. And I like to think of it as looking like kind of a stretched out M. So you can see it's kind of shaped like an M that's been really stretched out. And then top of the upper lip is kind of the same thing. It's usually a taller M, but it's still an M shape that's stretched out to whatever degree. The bottom looks kind of like a stretched out U, or you could think about it as being kind of 3 segments that you again kind of unite into a curve after you figured out their size and angles. Alright, so this time we're going to do another mouth, but we're going to shade it this time. So same procedure. It'll come through. Oh wait, I want to show you something else. If you're trying to do like a shaded drawing and it's like small and it's just a detail, you can often make a mouth just by using a couple of shadows. So the first shadow would be the shape of the upper lip, because that's usually facing down, so it's usually in shadow. And then if you just got another shadow under the lower lip, you can usually indicate a mouth that way. Here's kind of an example, and here's the nose up above, so you can kind of see how those shadow shapes can even just indicate a mouth and a nose very simply. Alright, so darken that line a little bit. Okay, so back to my shaded mouth here. I'm going to start with the middle segment again. So this is where the lips close together. And again, it's kind of a stretched out M shape. So I want to look at how that M is stretched, how wide it is, what angle all the parts of it are going at, to get the expression and the shape of the mouth correct. I messed up a little bit here. I'll have to correct it. There we go. That's better, I think. All right. So again, once we get this drawn in, I'll darken this a little bit. I'm going to go and do the top of the upper lip. That's again going to look a lot like a stretched out M. This one's going to be a little taller, but it's kind of the same set of 4 segments. And then the bottom of the lower lip is a stretched out U, kind of like this. And you can also think about that as being 3 segments that you make into a curve. So next thing, we got a little bit of a highlight here usually. So lips tend to be wet often, just like eyeballs, which means that they'll have highlights on them a lot of the time. So if you've got a highlight on the lip, again, you might want to draw around the highlight and then protect that while you're shading. So I'm adding a little bit of shadow, and now I'm going to add some of the lip color. I'm going to just go across and shade this. All right, there we go. And the texture of the lips will oftentimes break up the highlights, so you got kind of little lines coming through the highlight. And then I'm also going to have a little highlight up at the top of the upper lip. So depending on how the light's hitting the person, it's going to be different, but those are the places to generally look for the highlights. And then I'm going to add a little shadow where the lip curves under into the mouth here. So I want kind of a darker line for the middle of the mouth, and then a little shadow just where the upper lip turns down. Same idea here on the lower lip where it starts to curve down. I'll shade it a little bit. And then there will oftentimes be a little pocket of shadow underneath the mouth here. Alright, so those are the places to look for shadows on the mouth. And we have some other structures around the mouth. We've got philtrum up above. I'm going to draw that. A philtrum is that little divot right above your upper lip. And we'll also have kind of some expression lines on the side. Now, if a mouth is neutral like this, you're probably not going to see them, so this might look a little weird. But when the mouth is pulled up, we'll tend to see creases right here going from kind of the corners of the mouth to the corners of the nose there. Alright, so last but not least is the ear. The ear is kind of a hard one because there's a lot of nonsense going on inside of the ear. Who can really even visualize what an ear looks like? Anyway, I've got kind of a curve that comes up, one that comes across, and then one back down, and then another one going down at a different angle, and then that loop on the earlobe. And then we have a curve that kind of follows that first one, where the ear folds over. And then we got a little kind of loop here where the ear hole is. And then that comes up and curves into the ear. Right here, it kind of turns into a Y shape. So there's not a lot of hard edges in the ear, so it can be hard to do just line art of it. Well, I think that's pretty adequate right there. So for the shaded variant, we're going to go up, over, down at an angle, back down at an angle, and then make the kind of loop of the earlobe. I'm going to erase this because it kind of attaches in a weird spot. Yeah. Just adjust that line a little bit. And then again, we got this interior ridge where the ear kind of folds over and ends. And then that transitions over into this bottom edge. We got the little loop here right by the ear hole. Then it kind of runs along the same line as that first ridge we drew. And again, this kind of splits into a Y shape up at the top. So there's going to be a little shadow up there in between the arms of the Y. And now I'm going to start adding some shading. So there's going to be a shadow pocket kind of right here most of the time. Also going to have a shadow up here in between the Y. Some shadow under the ridge that comes around and over. And then a little bit in the ear hole here in this area. And then there's a kind of a little divot in the lobes sometimes where there might be some shadow collecting. You'll often have some shadow kind of along this ridge here where it folds over, and just all kinds of places inside these kind of folds and this nonsense that's happening inside of the ear. So you can kind of look for that, but if you're drawing from memory or imagination, this is kind of where you might want to put the shadows in. Now I'm just going to kind of darken in some of the lines, the key edges. And this is kind of, a matter of taste. You can kind of do this however you want. I'm just kind of strengthening some of the stronger lines that I want to emphasize in the drawing here. All right, so here's our finished product. Facial features are really important because you use them to draw faces. Drawing faces is a good way to make some cash. I used to hang out down by the wharf and draw people and then make them give me $5. A lot of people they feel bad buying art, but you gotta be insistent. I wouldn't let them leave until they gave me $5 for the picture I drew. They didn't even ask for the picture, I just, do it spontaneously. So it's a good money-making thing to know. And we're going to talk soon about the facial proportions and how to put all these together into a face. But it's good for you to know how to draw the features first. So I hope that was helpful, and we will see you next time.
Wasn't that wonderful, kids? I know I enjoyed it, and I bet you did too. Now remember, if you did enjoy the video, you are contractually obligated to leave $5 in the old coffee can out behind the Applebee's. It's under the bush. You know where it is, all right? So don't forget to pay your $5 for the video. You got to leave it in the coffee can. It's old coffee can. It's under the bush behind the Applebee's, all right? So don't forget to leave your $5 for Mr. Sketchy. I gotta earn my sketching dough, All right, we'll see you next time, kids. Goodbye.